Welcome back, and now we're switching topics to look at the situation in Niger Republic. Yesterday, the Northern Elders Forum had a meeting where they rose asking the leaders of ECOWAS to withdraw the sanctions on the Republic of Niger and to jettison the idea of a military intervention to restore democratic order in the country. The spokesperson of that forum, Mr. Hakeem Ahmed, gave the advice at a news conference in Abuja. He appealed to President Tinubu, who is the chairman of ECOWAS, to prioritize the interest of Africa over those of other nations who are pushing for military intervention. According to him, the removal of the sanctions on Niger will smoothen the negotiations process to restore democratic order in that country. Well, in the studio today, and here we do have the spokesperson of the Northern Elders Forum, Mr. Hakeem Ahmed, who is here to join us. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So yesterday, the Elders Forum rose and came up with four major resolutions. Amongst them, one is the removal of the sanctions that Nigeria had placed on Niger Republic. The other one being the balance, an advice to the president to balance his position as chairman and his position as the president of Nigeria. And if I do remember correctly, no military action. I'm sure. What are the other resolutions that your forum came up with?
Well, we commended everybody who has contributed to the search for peace, because we believe that is the most important thing. And we were very clear in terms of reminding Mr. President and ECOWAS that Nigerians emphatically say no to any military activity in Niger. It will not be helpful, it will complicate the matters more, and that Nigeria should be trusted to initiate and sustain a dialogue with the junta that is currently holding the Nigerian president and holding on to power, and to see whether we can actually make a headway rather than throw threats at the people of Niger. Clearly, it hasn't worked. 2 weeks, 3 weeks into the coup, into the first ultimatum. The first ultimatum, they gave Niger 1 week.
Yeah.
1 week came and passed, nothing happened. They met again and said this time they're activating a standby force. We haven't seen any standby force. All it is doing is just making the situation worse.
But you do recollect that the junta had said they are open for negotiations. I mean, they said that last week. So with the advice from the Elders Forum and the advice from other units that are saying, okay, dialogue is better, but you do also remember that the president in the last meeting of ECOWAS actually said diplomatic advances and negotiation and dialogue would be prioritized. So doesn't that look like he's already walking that path?
Well, not exactly, not exactly. In the morning of the day they had the meeting, the second extraordinary summit, those were his language was more conciliatory. He said we will prioritize dialogue. The communique of the meeting he chaired, our president, was quite adamant on the fact that the military option is going to be, in fact, not just that it will remain on the table, but it will be activated. So there's a problem, and that is why we recommended that President Tinubu should remember his place in history. This is a unique opportunity for him to show statesmanship. How do you balance a huge responsibility, for instance, of being chairman of ECOWAS, and the leader of the largest country in ECOWAS, 60% of ECOWAS, a country where virtually everybody had said, don't involve the military in the resolution of the conflict in Niger. And then your country on its own, either in support of ECOWAS resolutions or more to tighten the screw, now puts the people of Niger and Nigeria, because there are 7 states, let me remind you, 7 states in Nigeria that border Niger.
Yes.
Into extreme hardship. Life is very, very difficult. The sanctions that Nigeria is currently imposing on Niger and indirectly on its own people is biting very difficult, and it's making negotiations more difficult. Nigeria has a huge goodwill in Niger. We have a huge clout in Niger. If ECOWAS had the wisdom to assign Nigeria or to trust Nigeria with the responsibility of saying, look, why don't you talk to, you say they're your brothers, you said you have centuries of relationship, you've done this before, and we did do this before. Twice there was a coup in Niger, twice Nigeria successfully intervened. If they had the wisdom to say, Nigeria, you are the most influential nation in the whole of West Africa, as far as Niger is concerned. They have received our delegations. They have even apologized to the president for the manner in which they treated Abdul Salami and President General Abdul Salami and the Sultan of Sokoto. They have received Muslim clerics. They have said their only grievance against ECOWAS was that nobody asked them, why are you doing what you're doing? They said, if somebody had asked us why we moved against Bazoum, we would have explained. Now, I'm not apologizing for that. We are not supporting coups. But what I'm saying is that there's an opportunity. What we're saying in the Northern Elders Forum is examine and reinforce the dialogue option and allow Nigeria to exercise the huge responsibility which it has in terms of engaging the leaders currently, rather than these threats about, oh, we would come in with soldiers, we would come in with soldiers. Well, yesterday, I think it was yesterday, between yesterday and today, I heard that the Ghanaian Assembly, like our Senate, had said to the Ghanaian president, don't send a single Ghanaian soldier. Today, the African Union said they don't support a military action in Niger.
Well, you do know that the Nigerian Senate had had not given approval to the president's request to release the military.
Like
we'll come back to this conversation because there are those who are concerned about the cause of these coups. There's a coup in Burkina Faso, there's a coup in Mali, and they have tied it to bad governance, and that is likely to spread. But we'll come back to this conversation. Let's get back to that story that came in earlier about the release of the ministerial list from the presidency, and we did call out some of those names. If we could have it on the screen right now, those that have been given the different portfolios. Yes, you have it there. Bosun Tijani, I'm trying to see that clearly now. Yes, so Minister for Communication, Innovation and Digital Economy, Bosun Tijani. Minister of State Environment and Ecological Management is Ishaq Salako. Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun. Minister of Marine and Blue Economy, Bumi Tunji. The Minister of Power, Adedayo Adelabu. The Minister of State Health and Social Welfare, Tunisia Alausa. The Minister of Solid Minerals Development, Dele Alake. Minister of Tourism, Lola Adejan. Minister of Transportation, Adegboyega Oyetola. The Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Doris Anite. Minister of Innovation, Science and Technology, Uche Naji. The Minister of State, Labour and Employment, Nkiruka Onyejiocha. Minister of Women Affairs, Uju Kennedy. The Minister of Works, David Umahi. Minister of Aviation and Aerospace Development, Festus Keyamo. Minister of Youth, Abubakar Momo. Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, Betta Edu. The Minister of State Gas Resources, Ekberikbe Ekbo. Minister of State Petroleum Resources, Heineken Lukboberi. The Minister of Sports Development, Senator John Owaneno. Minister of Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike. Now, as I said earlier, we do know that about 45 names were confirmed by the Senate, so we're expecting that more of these names and portfolios will be released shortly, and we'll bring that to you as soon as we get them. But let's get back to our conversation here. Mr. Ahmed, we want to react to that list you just heard.
I was hoping to see Minister of Foreign Affairs because of all the ministers that President Tinubu requires now. It's wise counsel from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and its affiliates or agencies. I think that the absence of a Minister of Foreign Affairs and quite possibly the distance between the president and agencies that should advise him in terms of the conduct of foreign policy is hurting the country.
So you think a Minister of Foreign Affairs coming in immediately will be good to go in this matter?
Absolutely, and hopefully he will get a good person who would, let me use the word in a general way, yes, and hit the ground running. Because we do have a crisis that requires the major inputs of the Minister of Foreign Affairs and very, very, very delicate handling. And only the Minister of Foreign Affairs can do that. I don't know who's been handling that portfolio, but the gaps are showing. I should know this. I was a permanent secretary in that ministry many, many years ago. So it is a ministry that is critical, and I'm hoping...
So you think the permanent secretary there now is not handling the matters as he or she
permanent secretaries don't get too close to presidents. I mean, ordinarily they should. A president who doesn't have a minister will reach to the permanent secretary. What I'm saying is that there are gaps in our thinking and in our reaction to events, particularly on Niger and West Africa, that clearly are not benefiting from the best advice that we should get.
Okay,
We are doing some things wrong.
Okay, let's get back to that matter of the coup in Niger. The junta had said they're going to prosecute the president, Bazoum, for what they said? Treason. For high treason, if I remember, those are the words they use. What do you think? What do you think?
Oh, we had that. But if we had a negotiating framework now, those are exactly the kind of words we would ask them. We would say to the people of Niger, we heard you are going to prosecute Bazoum. Can you give us additional information about what it is that you are prosecuting him over? Is this a red herring? Is it real? Are you really going to do that? And do you recognize the fact that you actually seized power from this man? That's treasonable too. Do you have the moral and the legal authority to actually prosecute a president that you have overthrown, violating every rule and every law? Those are the kind of delicate questions you would ask if you were actually communicating government to government or ECOWAS to Niger. But those communications aren't there.
The question I want to ask you is, from the Northern Elders Forum, seeing that there are 7 northern states that are bordering Niger, one would want to believe that the Elders Forum on this side of the divide is reaching out to the elders on the other side. What's the conversation you're having, and what's the perspective you're getting from there?
The perspectives we're getting there is that a lot of people in Niger can't believe that Nigeria is reacting in the way it is. They just can't believe that we can put them in such difficulty. Look, just the fact that we remove the plug on the power we supply to Niger is putting the Nigerian people and the economy there in great difficulties. More difficulties than they have ever experienced. And it's hurting northern communities close to Niger too. Whatever happens in Niger automatically happens in Nigeria. That is how intimately involved Niger and Nigeria are. So this is not the time to turn the screw. This is the time to talk.
But are the elders on that side having conversations with the junta to say, okay, look, these are the reasons why this is happening on the other side. What grounds are you willing to shift so that we can also negotiate on this other side? As in, be the go-between.
Well, look, the two key public mediation or the 2 key initiatives we saw. The one involving the former emir of Kano and the leader and the Islamic clerics, all involved people, their counterparts from Niger, and they were granted audience. And let me remind you, these 2 groups, the emir of Kano and the clerics, all flew, in spite of the no-fly zone, all flew into Niamey and met with the leader of the coup. So there is a huge amount of goodwill there. It's not as if people can't believe that we can be at war. Under any circumstances, Nigeria would not go to war with Niger. Nigerian soldiers will not turn, Niger and Nigerian soldiers will not turn their guns at each other. This is not a problem that cannot be solved through dialogue and an effective and rigorous application of the dialogue process. And the dialogue process is wonderful if you really genuinely apply it. But look at the other side of it. If you are going to go into, and today, as I told you, let me remind you, the African Union specifically said they don't support the ECOWAS position that the military option can be activated in Niger. This is the African Union going against ECOWAS. The Nigerian people have said, don't send our soldiers to Niger. Ghanaian people said, don't send our soldiers to Niger. Many countries in ECOWAS have said, no, we have nothing to do with this. So that's why we said to President Tinubu, you are wearing 2 hats. You have to find a way to balance them in such a way that history will record you as a statesman who was able to balance these 2 positions. Don't get carried away by one of them. Listen to your Nigerian people. You were first a Nigerian president before you became chairman of ECOWAS. Otherwise, you would never be anywhere near ECOWAS. And you're accountable to the Nigerian people. And the Nigerian people are saying, look, let us explore the diplomatic option more vigorously. Use your influence in ECOWAS. Use your influence in Niger. and find a way in which Nigeria can actually broker some kind of an understanding. What is this talk about treason against Bazoum? Why do we need to put the people of Niger under such difficulties and preclude the option of sustaining the level of goodwill and brotherhood that exists between Nigeria and Niger, and therefore make negotiations more difficult? Why do we need to do this?
Right now we're in the tight. The president is in a tight situation. AU says don't go, the Nigerian people are saying don't go, and indeed a lot of people around are saying do not go. But there are others who are saying just leave that on standby. And if I do recollect, the ECOWAS military force was supposed to be on standby, not deployed yet. So at the end of the day, what would the elders forum and what would be the word to the president? What would be the way forward?
Well, they meet tomorrow, Thursday. Our word to them is listen to the voices of your people. West African people are against a war in another country over a coup. Listen to your people. The diplomatic option is still there, can be strengthened, and can work. Listen to your people. There are extra African countries, interests outside Africa. I don't have to mention them, but they are not African interests, pushing us to war, because they have strategic interests to protect. We have to be very careful. We can fight each other while other interests outside Africa are just simply taking away our resources. We're already poor in this world, and suddenly very powerful nations in the world are trying to put us to continue to fight so they can continue to exploit us. We must avoid this. We'll be fighting each other. We'll be fighting brothers. And so you have to ask yourself, at what cost?
At what point would the Africans come together to begin to protect and govern their people effectively and protect the resources
Well, that's exactly, you are asking the right question. When African leaders respect their own people, when African leaders remember that they're elected and they're accountable, when African people stop stealing the resources of their people, when African leaders stop violating the Constitution, when our elections start producing genuinely elected people, and we stop all these arguments about you are illegitimate and you're illegitimate. And it makes little difference between an illegitimate civilian president and an illegitimate military government. Then democracy will have a stronger base to stay in Africa. Basically, we don't want to pay this attention. We have to ask ourselves this question. Why is it so easy to do a coup in Africa? And why do people come out in their hundreds of thousands to say, welcome? It's a very serious question we have to ask. What is the fate of democracy in Africa? Is it working? All the arguments we have over elections, you are legitimate, you rig an election, you don't rig an election, you have poor leaders. How can you tolerate a leader who has been in power for 20 years, 30 years? So people come and serve 2 terms. And suddenly now they want to prolong their terms into 3 terms. We tolerated Mali, we tolerated Burkina Faso, we virtually tolerated Guinea-Bissau. What moral right do we have now to draw the line and say, okay, that's it? We should, because military rule doesn't do anything other than to freeze the wrongs. And then after 2, 3, 4 years, just simply unfreeze it. And then we are stuck where we were 2, 3 years ago. We are against coups.
All right.
We would like to see an end to the Nigerian debacle as quickly as possible, but we believe that the diplomatic option is the best way to do this.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hakeem Baba Ahmed. Thank you for joining us this morning. Spokesperson for the Northern Elders Forum. Thank you.
Thank you.